Right, gosh, big lights. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along. You can sit quietly after a very good lunch, and I hope that what I have to say doesn't put you to sleep, but starts to reawaken you. It was reported only last week that Apple, as the company that we all know, actually had a market cap that was larger than the whole of the Russian stock exchange put together, combined. And in fact, the figures I had noted down from last week was that Apple's value was 670 billion. But I noticed actually that on the news today it had gone up to 700 billion. And the total of the Russian stock exchange is $531 billion. US dollars I'm talking about, not Singaporean. But it just shows you the size of that company. Yes, the biggest company in the world. But do you know that when I started out as an accountant, it was introduced that I used to be back in the early 70s. If you took the 100 largest economic entities in the world, they were all countries. If you take the top 100 economic entities in the world today, you'll find that more than half of them are companies. And that leads to its own, that leads to its own conclusions. And to borrow a phrase from my chairman, Mervyn King, is actually that a company can no longer be apart from society. It has to be a part of society. And companies and business and stock exchanges and markets and civil society are starting, and have certainly progressed quite significantly in the last few years, in understanding that change that we've seen. Never mind the reporting world and the investment world and things like that. It is just a significant change that we all hopefully recognize, and I'm sure you all recognize, by being in this hall today. I could use the same language and the same statistics if I moved into the investor space, but I won't steal Toby's speech off after myself by talking too much around the investor side. And what I wanted to move on to, if I could, is to introduce to you today the whole concept of integrated reporting. And you may think, we had a session before where I introduced the principles of integrated reporting. I'm not going to do that. If you want to look it up, the International Integrated Reporting Framework. It's very easy to find. Key principles around value creation and the 6 capitals. That's the depth I'm going to go to in integrated reporting today, because I want to talk about it at a slightly higher level. But what we're trying to do in the world of integrated reporting is to bring what we call the capitals, a multi-capital approach to the understanding of what a business is trying to do as it creates value into the longer term. Not just its profitability, but its whole impact, and therefore its sustainable business model. We all use the word sustainability, and I've heard it used in this conference, and actually you are using it assuming that everybody understands that sustainability means what it's being used for at the time. When I talk about sustainability, I'm talking about sustainable business models, models that make companies either grow or diminish in value over a period of time. I'm not talking about the planet. What we're saying in the integrated reporting world is if you do get sustainable business models and investors, Toby, that actually do have stewardship and understand that whole same process around the responsibility of business and the responsibility of the capital market, then you will have a virtuous circle which brings us through to a sustainable planet and a sustainable world that we can live in. It's all part of what we believe in. And I wanted to illustrate, to give you an idea of what are some of the roots of integrated reporting. Why is the reporting element worthwhile? Well, reporting as such is only worthwhile if it influences behavior. And it influences how business, in the case that I'm talking about, actually operates in itself. A great example is where integrated reporting in many ways started, which is in South Africa. Okay? When Nelson Mandela came to power in the mid-1990s, he brought in a former Supreme Court judge, Mervyn King, who is our chairman, to look at corporate governance in the South African context. And actually what Mervyn ended up doing is a series of what were called the King reports. And the King Committee and the King reports ended up by saying that actually what you had to have was to look broader than just financial capital when you're thinking about how you govern and run an organization. And that, I think, is fundamental to it. In South Africa, there were certain drivers. So, for example, one of the key drivers in South Africa, and one of the underpinning methodologies that Mervyn King had to deal with, is actually the change in the societal aspects, the whole black empowerment agenda, which had to be put in place in that country. But it may have been a driver through government, but nonetheless, it's not the core of what they've delivered. And in fact, if you look at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, which has implemented integrated reporting as a listing requirement, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange comes out very high, if not top, of most of the stock exchange metrics that come through. So it just shows that actually it can be productive and useful in the long term. And we're seeing different drivers in different parts of the world. If I was in Japan, I could talk about Abenomics and why that is a driver. If I was in the US, we could talk about where the US is going at the moment, although actually let's forget the US at this stage. It's too complicated. But where we are here in Singapore, what we should perhaps be considering is everything I hear and I read about Singapore is about making it an international hub for investment and for business and for the whole sustainability agenda as well. Well, there is a driver there to actually be innovative and to start taking steps that really make a difference. Integrated reporting is the foundation stone for communicating how these businesses are creating value over that long term. And I think it's really important that we don't forget that this is not the replacement for sustainability reporting, just as much as it's not the replacement for financial reporting. Those are the pillars on which the ideas and the strategy of an organization can be most effectively delivered in an integrated report. Okay, so what we are talking about is utilizing the data and information that provides. There's no way I've been speaking for 15 minutes. I've got a time up here. I think what I'd like to move on and talk about, if I could, is what has been delivered. I mean, the World Bank is an example. And the World Bank, I'm delighted to say, has adopted integrated reporting. And the driver there is that the World Bank are trying to deliver to eradicate poverty. So why would they do integrated reporting? Well, the idea is that actually you have to connect the funding and the push on the funding requirements through to the eradication of poverty. How are those connected? If the value that you're creating is to eradicate poverty, how are your funding programs actually coming together? What is the performance that you're dealing with? And that's what they're talking about. And last month at the World Bank, there were the World Bank annual meetings where all the governors of the various central banks around the world come to convene. And I facilitated a session with the CFO of the World Bank and also Mark Carney. Mark Carney is the governor of the Bank of England and also the chairman of the Financial Stability Board, which is the organ of the G20 in terms of capital markets. And Mark Carney used a phrase that I'd like you to remember. He used the phrase, the tragedy of horizons. And he said that one of the key problems in the capital market system is that actually the system dictates that you look there and there, just in front of you and behind you, right? Whereas actually what we need to do is we know there are risks and opportunities looking forward, but yet the capital market system doesn't do that. And he specifically raised the issue of climate change in that speech, and he was talking very specifically about that in that particular speech. But he broadened it when I challenged him and questioned him in the debate to say, actually, the tragedy of horizons is not just about climate change. It's about the whole forward-looking perspective of business and the public sector. And certainly capital markets have significant ideas to learn. What we have created is a principles-based framework, and there are over 1,000 companies in the world starting to do integrated reporting. The leading company here in Singapore is DBS Bank, as you may well know. Have a look at their integrated report. Have a look at their integrated report when it comes out early next year, because I believe it is going to be something pretty special internationally. But there are companies like Mitsubishi Corporation in Japan, the likes of Unilever, National Australia Bank, and PepsiCo and Tata Steel. These are all companies, I mean, iconic companies, yes, but companies that are on their way. And they are seeing real benefits by going through the process, not just by producing a report. So let me conclude before I get the ire of the organizers here today. And that is that we have high ideals in the world of integrated reporting. We believe that we are a tool and a catalyst for financial stability and sustainable development. Big aims. We by no means are going to make those things happen, but we are one of the tools that can help make that happen. And it has to be that greater transparency in context, not just more information, but information in context. People talk about materiality. Materiality means different things to different people. Information in context that is useful to the long-term value creation of the organization is something that we need to do. And we need to make sure that that communication is actually a dialogue that helps businesses to build long-term trust with their investors, with their customers, with the suppliers, with the employees, and with the society amongst which they exist, to create that sustainable platform for the future and the financially stable platform for the future. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you again.